Monsieur le Président de l'Arménie,
President of Armenia,
Mr. President, it is a true honor and a real pleasure to welcome you in this chamber. The Council of Europe is an organization of 47 European states, and our Parliamentary Assembly is and remains a pan-European platform for political dialogue where the views and aspirations of the leaders of all our member states should be represented. Therefore, your visit today is very important for us. Mr. President, you visited Strasbourg in October 2013 when Armenia was chairing the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe and when you had just started the first year of your second presidential mandate. You shared with us at that time a clear and ambitious political program aimed at consolidating and strengthening further Armenia's democratic institutions. A lot of progress has been made since, and this morning we had an opportunity to discuss together the numerous steps your authorities have taken, including the constitutional and electoral reform, as well as the strengthening of the independence of the judiciary and the stepping up of the fight against corruption. The political transition to a new parliamentary political system has now been almost complete, but a number of reform issues still remain on the table, and I would like to assure you, Mr. President, of the Council of Europe's and our Assembly's full support on this front. Mr. President, you are well aware of the challenges that Council of Europe faces today. I strongly believe that this can be effectively overcome only if all Member States and all Council of Europe institutions and stakeholders reaffirm their commitment to the ideals of European unity and to the values and principles of democracy, human rights and the rule of law. From our discussion this morning, I know that Armenia's commitment to these ideals and principles is strong. Therefore, we are looking forward to hearing your views. Mr. President, thank you for being here. You have the floor.
Honorable President of the Parliamentary Assembly, Honorable Secretary General, distinguished members of the Assembly. At the outset, I would like to warmly greet you and congratulate you, distinguished Mr. Nicoletti, on assuming the high office of the President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. You have indeed embarked upon this mission in rather challenging times. I strongly believe that your extensive experience and are exactly what is needed for the future success and reputation of our organization. I also wish to commend Mrs. Kyriakidis for her excellent performance in the capacity of President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The last time I had the honor to speak from this high podium was in 2013 when Armenia held the chairmanship in the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. That mission served as a key landmark in our integration within the larger family of the Council of Europe. I trust we met the expectations while carrying out that mission. Tomorrow is January 25, the day on which we acceded to the Council of Europe exactly 17 years ago. At the time of joining this Europe-wide structure, we were fully aware of the path that lay ahead of us. We were also fully aware that building and strengthening democracy would not be easy without the support and direct involvement of the Council of Europe structures. Indeed, through political will and joint constructive engagement, we managed to overcome numerous obstacles and to achieve profound improvements. As I stand before this assembly today, I can proudly state that we have honored the main commitments assumed vis-à-vis the Council of Europe in terms of Armenia's democratization. Moreover, this is not just our assertion. Our achievements in consolidating democratic institutions have been recognized by the monitoring reports of the Council of Europe bodies. We firmly continue the efforts of joining the Europe-wide legal framework. The number of conventions Armenia has already signed up is close to 70. For us, this process is not simply about honoring the commitments that we undertook. In April, when the amendments adopted under the reformed constitution will enter into force, and we will embark upon the implementation of activities envisaged by our comprehensive and intense partnership agreement with the EU. Any democracy is a living organism. Throughout our quarter-century-long efforts in state building, we aimed at nourishing this organism. We have been fully conscious that democracy constantly requires attention, review, and advancement. It cannot afford a standstill and must keep up with the rapidly changing times in order to remain viable. Along the lines of this logic, we undertook constitutional reform in Armenia, which received wide-ranging support of the Council of Europe. I have announced it from this high podium.
Since succeeding to the Council of Europe, dear ladies and gentlemen, our country has heard the criticism and encouragement of the Council of Europe. I have no doubt that both have contributed strongly to Armenia's progress. This whole time we have cooperated closely with the Venice Commission, and based on the expert opinion of the Venice Commission, we refined the constitutional reforms package. In an atmosphere of mutual trust, this efficient engagement continues to date through a process of implementing numerous new legislative solutions under the reformed constitution. This was best manifested in deliberations of Armenia's new electoral code, which resulted in the adoption of the code in a transparent and inclusive process with the participation of the various political actors across the board. We opted for something unprecedented. For the first time in history, we published the signed lists of voters after the election. As you know, this practice is not common, especially in light of personal data protection concerns. However, we decided, and we did so in order to achieve greater public trust in the elections. The new electoral code clearly proved its viability in the 2017 April parliamentary election. This election was observed by a large number of invited observation missions, including a delegation of this assembly. It is important to underline that the new electoral code also resulted in allocation in the National Assembly of a certain number of seats, which are exclusively for representation of the national minorities. This is yet another step towards more participatory and inclusive governance. We're currently reforming our judicial, criminal and criminal procedure codes, as well as the Referendum Act and the law on the Constitutional Court. We are well aware that the rule of law can be safeguarded only by having an effective, independent and corruption risk-free judiciary. In this context, we highly appreciate the important role of the European Court of Human Rights, the jurisprudence of which plays an essential role in enhancing the quality of justice in our country. Based on the jurisprudence of the European Court, we have implemented a number of legislative reforms and we have improved the legal practices. These are important steps for consolidation of the human rights protection in our country. These efforts have not gone unnoticed. The Republic of Armenia is a leader among the Council of Europe member states in terms of proper and consistent implementation of the judgments of the European Court. We are convinced that proper protection of human rights and consolidation of democratic values cannot be effective without a relentless fight against corruption. The fight against corruption must be prioritized at all social and political layers. Armenia is contemplating a qualitatively new toolkit in this respect. In mid-2017, the Armenian Parliament unanimously adopted a number of laws that create a first-ever national entity for the prevention of corruption in line with all international standards. The entity will become effective in 2018 and the Parliament will elect its members. The anti-corruption package also resulted in the adoption of a law on whistleblowing and the protection of whistleblowers. We have also criminalized illicit enrichment. We are determined and committed to continuing our systemic and persistent everyday efforts towards eliminating the evil of corruption.
Distinguished members of the Assembly, since accession to the Council of Europe, our country has borne profound responsibility for honoring our obligations and respecting our collective commitment to the fundamental values of this organization. However, in recent years, we have witnessed an unfortunate and unprecedented crisis of values in this organization. Through their irresponsible conduct, to say the least, some MPs have acted contrary to the core mission of the Council of Europe and inflicted heavy blow upon the organization's reputation. The greater family of the Council of Europe thus faced perhaps the most serious challenge since its foundation, as cases of bribing assembly members and resulting dishonest voting were exposed. Since 2014, a number of politically biased and egregious reports and resolutions triggered a sharp change in the attitudes of Armenian society towards this assembly. However, these revelations justify the hopes that such corrupt practices are short-lived. Eventually, they will rise to the surface, stamping out resolutions thus adopted and discrediting the individuals and powers resolution platform. I believe it is appropriate to briefly touch upon the issue in light of our aforementioned commitment. Exactly 30 years ago, on the surface, everything could possibly seem calm and peaceful in Artsakh. However, the surface image was deceiving. We had never put up with Stalin's decision to annex Artsakh to Azerbaijan. Throughout all those years, the people of Artsakh and peaceful demonstration, and the other had violence and massacres. Everyone who needs to deal with the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict resolution must clearly comprehend this fact. Equality sign between the perpetrators of the Sumgait massacre and its victims. On February 27, we shall commemorate the victims of the Sumgait massacre. The massacres went on to become the state policy as Azerbaijan unleashed a war aimed at the complete annihilation of the Armenian population of Artsakh. Given the deficit of justice and the threat of extermination, Artsakh had no other choice but to resort to self-defense. Yet again, I was at the forefront, and I have never had the slightest regret about the choice I made then. The time is ripe for the resolution of this conflict. It requires strict respect for the established ceasefire regime and honoring all the agreements reached in the past. Settlement must be peaceful and overcome the deficit of justice. No matter where I find myself, I will always be at the forefront for this matter as well. The parties shall assume joint responsibility for the peaceful resolution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and find a compromise, a middle ground settlement. The negotiation process under the auspices of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs is the only internationally agreed format for the resolution of this conflict. The international community, including Council of Europe, has reiterated its support to this format on numerous occasions. The commitment undertaken by Armenia and Azerbaijan requires a joint and concerted effort of all the parties to the conflict. However, Azerbaijan is obviously not ready for that. The aggression that Azerbaijan unleashed against Artsakh in April 2016 was characterized by egregious violations of the international humanitarian law against the peaceful civilians and prisoners of war. It struck a heavy blow upon the negotiation process by reawakening dreadful memories of the Sumgait massacres. Unfortunately, this assembly has at times allowed developments that turned a blind eye to the aforementioned facts, watering the mill of those who are not interested in peaceful settlement of the conflict. I call upon all the members of this assembly to apprehend the potential negative consequences of a careless or a biased language for the fragile security and in Artsakh. Facing a permanent threat of war, Artsakh continues to build democracy and promote respect for human rights. In all of these initiatives, Armenia will provide full support to Artsakh. Armenia will tenaciously defend the rights and interests of Artsakh and help to strengthen Artsakh's security. As the Secretary General of the Council of Europe has rightly noted, there must be no grey zones in Europe when it comes to the protection of human rights. I hope that in the not-too-distant future, this organization too will stand by the side Artsakh with all of its expertise. A person living in Artsakh deserves it. The people of Artsakh have long earned this right. The protection of human rights is a priority for the Artsakh government. As to the fundamental documents of the Council of Europe, Artsakh unilaterally subscribed to the European Convention of Human Rights and undertook to implement it fully. Commendably, Nagorno-Karabakh has achieved all of this on its own, without tangible support from any international organization. It proves once again that in Artsakh, respect for and protection of human rights are not mere words, but a conscious and determined choice. Artsakh cannot stay out of the international processes simply because Azerbaijan is opposed to it. The authorities of Azerbaijan commit flagrant violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms, not least the criminal prosecution of opposition figures and even their abduction from the territory of another country. This brings me back to the work of the European Court of Human Rights. The ECHR has examined applications by Azerbaijani citizens that are also related to the resolution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. I understand that the ECHR takes up this issue with the sole purpose of precluding grey areas and safeguarding human rights throughout Europe. Nevertheless, political language and assessments in the decisions of the ECHR can have direct negative impact on the negotiation process. Therefore, it is necessary for the ECHR to exercise extreme caution in its assessments and avoid any political language. Distinguished members of the Assembly, our national economies are more vulnerable than ever in the face of the present-day global challenges. As a result, welfare and prosperity are at the center of the public attention. The challenging realities in our region, in their turn, undermine the economic growth potential. Therefore, we aspire to make the best use of all available resources, including the opportunities availed to us by integration structures. 5 years ago, in 2013, shortly after Armenia's decision to accede to the Eurasian Economic Union, on the margins of the Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels, Armenia and the European Union concluded a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement, which contemplates a completely new quality of engagement. Armenia's fully fledged integration in the Eurasian Economic Union was not an obstacle for that matter in any way or shape. Today, we actively continue to extend our international engagement in various other directions. The Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie is a case in point. That is, for us, a unique platform of engagement in terms of both language and culture and promotion of human rights. Armenia will have the honor to host the 17th summit of La Francophonie in October 2018 in Yerevan. The motto of the summit will be Vivre Ensemble, living together, and a pact with the same name will be adopted for strengthening human rights and intercultural and interreligious dialogue. For us, it is not simply a motto. The Armenian nation knows the price of hate speech, intolerance and discrimination, and we fight against these practices on all possible platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, next year we will celebrate the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Council of Europe. It is a crucial landmark for our greater family, which has been fighting for the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms in Europe for almost 7 decades. An organization created by only 10 states, it now unites 47 states of the European family with a population of 820 million. I consider this to be an enormous achievement that should be cherished. No effort should be spared in building a positive agenda and further enhancing the role and significance of this organization. The mission of the Council of Europe, however, extends beyond that. The organization has a great role to play in political as well as civilizational terms. I believe that the organization needs a further stimulus in redefining its role and significance in Europe-wide political agriculture. The contemporary mechanism and arrangements are truly wanted by our societies in order to increase this organization's effectiveness. For quite some time now, we are closely following and keep at the center of our attention the commendable process of reforms initiated in the Council of Europe. Armenia supports the idea of convening a 4th summit of the heads of state and governments of the Council of Europe. I believe it will be a good opportunity for identifying the most pressing problems and issues of our continent and revisiting the vision of a stronger and more inclusive Europe. I am confident that the founders of the Council of Europe should have been very proud about the fact of uniting 47 countries of Europe under one roof. This is an achievement, the importance of which should not be underestimated. This unity needs continuous support from all of us. Armenia stands ready for the persistent journey towards a more mature form of engagement and cooperation. Armenia stands ready to contribute by all means at its disposal to the success of the Council of Europe, our shared home of democracy and the rule of law. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sargsyan, for your interesting address. Members of the Assembly have questions to put to you. I remind them that questions must be limited to 30 seconds and no more. Colleagues should be asking questions and not making speeches. I first call Mrs. Kau, Norway, on behalf of the EPP Group.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. President, for visiting the Council. Mr. President, 10 years term of your presidency comes to the end. Summarising these years, could you please indicate the major achievement of Armenia in its European agenda, having in mind the recent agreement signed between Armenia and EU that you mentioned in your speech? Thank you.
I thank you. If you mean the European agenda of Armenia, I shall note that in the course of the past 10 years, Armenia has registered serious achievements, both on the bilateral track with the European nations, as well as in the multilateral setting. As I mentioned, both in the years 2016 and 2017, the Committee of Ministers and Parliamentary Assembly co-rapporteurs in their reports recognized the progress made by Armenia. Not to speak too long, I just would illustrate it with one example. In the year 2008, when I got elected to the post of the President of the Republic of Armenia, we were facing serious challenges, and the relations was tense with the Council of Europe, and even the threat of sanctions was heard. And 10 years later, now we're talking about the achievements of Armenia. As regards the relations with the European Union of ours, as I mentioned, just 2 months ago, on November 24th, we concluded with the European Union new comprehensive agreement with European Union, which is opening large horizons for Armenia. We consider ourselves Europeans, regardless of the fact whether Europeans consider us to be as such. Therefore, our cooperation with European nations and European structures stems from our conviction, and nobody is imposing it upon us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now the second question, Mrs. Doris Barnett from Germany, Socialist Group.
Thank you very much. President, talks with representatives of your country as well as Azerbaijan have shown that both sides would like to see an end to the conflict which has been dragging on for the last 26 years, and the whole package and individual steps do not diverge too much from one another. Now, we stand for dialogue and reconciliation. What can we do to assist you, the President, as well as the Parliament of Armenia, to try and resolve a conflict to spare people further suffering and also to guarantee a rosier future?
Շատ շնորհակալ եմ.
National community can do. I believe that the main obstacle to the negotiation is Azerbaijan's maximalist and unrealistic set of expectations vis-à-vis the outcome of the negotiation. If the international community could help Azerbaijan to rid itself of the illusions and to arrive at a realistic juncture, I think in a short time we could achieve great success. Indeed, this conflict is an obstacle to the development of our nations. It takes away human lives. It inflicts great financial loss and material loss, and there's truly a need for this conflict to be resolved. You see, the negotiations are also hindered by the unfortunate fact that the achieved agreements are not carried out. As you know, in 2016, Azerbaijan unleashed a large-scale military operation with the aim of returning Nagorno-Karabakh into Azerbaijan by use of force. Since then, we had meetings in Vienna, St. Petersburg, followed by meetings in Geneva, and in the course of these meetings, in the first two at least, high-level officials were represented, mediators from the co-chair countries were there, and we agreed that the best way to continue the negotiation is to build some elements of trust. And in that sense, we decided to create a mechanism, an international mechanism to investigate violations of the ceasefire and in some way to broaden, to widen the mandate of the personal representative of the OSCE chairmanship in office and to give the personal representative additional tools for de-escalation. Unfortunately, though, that did not materialize because immediately after those meetings, Azerbaijan's highest officials uttered statements whereby they said that these were not their words, these were the words of the co-chairs, and that the Nagorno-Karabakh issue is a domestic matter of Azerbaijan. Under those circumstances, to anticipate a swift resolution or intensive progress in the negotiation would be unrealistic. Turning to your question, I would like to say that our appeal to all of us is to get the parties to be realistic.
Thank you. Next question from Mr. Türkes from Turkey, European Conservative.
Mr. President, though there was a protocol between Armenia and Turkey, I recall it being not in anyone's agenda. Does this mean that the stagnation in Armenian-Turkish relations will continue in the foreseeable future? Is it possible for Armenia to act in any way that will show its intentions to normalize its relations in the region after the presidential elections in your country in March?
Գիտեք, մենք
You see, we don't really understand well the demand of the Turkish side to do something. In 2008, after I got elected, I initiated Security Council. We signed two documents on the establishment of relations between Armenia and Turkey. Before the launch of the negotiations, those documents very clearly stated, and they still do state, that these relations are to be established without any preconditions. But unfortunately, after signing the protocols, the Turkish side has constantly tried. To date, it is in fact trying to come up with preconditions. In the international experience, we have not come across similar examples. All terms are negotiated before a deal is signed. After a document is signed, basic morality requires complying with the requirements of a document. 9 years down the road, we keep hearing again from the Turkish side about the need to allegedly take some steps. Should the establishment of relations between countries require some gestures, some concessions? The document very clearly states that relations are to be established, after which all of the existing wrinkles between the two countries should be discussed. But the Turkish side, let me reiterate, is coming up with preconditions. We never can accept any preconditions. Turkey is a powerful state. Indeed, Turkey has enormous potential, and Armenia's potential is not to be compared with that of Turkey. But this is not to mean that Turkey should speak from a position of power or in the language of preconditions. If that were the case, countries much more powerful than Turkey are out there in terms of their population and economy, and then those powerful states would speak with Turkey from a position of power or in the language of preconditions. And I think the Turkish authorities and the Turkish people would never accept such an attitude. We, similarly, do not accept such an attitude. It would simply be highly desirable, irrespective of the fact that these protocols will, in the near future, sometime before the spring, be voided by Armenia because they are pointless. I believe it would be appropriate, it would be correct for the Turkish side, for maintaining fragile stability in the region, to give up on its biased position of unequivocal support for Azerbaijan. I would like to remind you that during the hostilities in 2016, Turkey was the only country in the world that expressed support for the military action. In 4 days, Turkey's president and prime minister combined issued 5 statements in support of and in defense of Azerbaijan. What can we do under these circumstances? It would be an insult for our people to make one-sided concessions for establishing relations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, Mrs. Rodriguez Hernandez from Spain, ALDE Group.
President, going beyond theory and talking about the association agreement between Europe and Armenia, what key measures have been taken so far in combating corruption, violence and crime, and also against terrorism? And talking about this current agreement, which we think will be more ambitious, what's the difference between this and the previous one? What are the key elements which are more ambitious, and what elements are there in this agreement which will make it a reality and more ambitious? Thank you.
In my speech, I addressed the efforts that we have carried out in Armenia towards eradicating corruption. And I want to say that unfortunately our efforts have not borne too great results. This despicable phenomenon exists in Armenia, among other countries. As I said last year, we enacted a law whereby we created a corruption prevention commission. This legislation is fully in line with the European best standards. Members of the commission are to be elected by the Armenian parliament after April 9, once the amended constitution provisions come into full force. As I said, we adopted a law on whistleblowing and the protection of whistleblowers. We have criminalized illicit enrichment. And if my memory is not failing, close to 500 Armenian officials will be required to submit declarations of their assets and income. For a country as small as Armenia, that is a huge number. There is vibrant civil society in Armenia, and civil society in turn is making a contribution to exposing and solving these crimes, as well as to their prevention. Turning now to punishment. Every year, the number of criminal cases initiated and the number of judgments pronounced multiplies several folds, and these are judgments for corruption offenses. Now, if you're asking me about general crime and criminality, I must say in 2017, the grave crime rate in Armenia was reduced by about 20%, and this includes crimes like murder, this includes we're confident that our cooperation with the EU will grow deeper. because we cooperate with the European organizations not in order to show to anyone that we are cooperating, but because we consider ourselves bearers of the European value system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, Mr. Psychogios from Greece.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. President, what impact on the rule of law and the protection of human rights will the transition to a parliamentary system have? And second, what impact will the privatization and liberalization policies provided in the new constitution have, given that neoliberal policies, wherever applied, have led to increase of inequalities and violation of socio-economic rights? What countermeasures will the government take in this context? Thank you.
Inclusive governance, it is more transparent governance, and it is more in line with the vision for consolidating democracy. I'm not sure if I got the second part of your question. So we believe that the parliamentary form of government will help to develop democracy, human rights protection in our country. The parliamentary system of government will have a greater impact on civil society. The parliamentary form of government will enable greater accountability. The parliamentary government will enable closer cooperation with our European partners.
Thank you. Now the next question from Mr. Fournier, France, from the EPP group.
Monsieur le Président, mes chers collègues,
President,
comment l'Arménie réussit-elle à concilier son appartenance
how
au partenariat
is
oriental
Armenia going to reconcile its membership of the Eastern Partnership of the European Union with its membership of the Euro-Asian Community? And what is the current state of relations between Armenia and Russia? Thank you very much.
Well, you see, I think we're already reconciling the two, and we have no doubt that by acceding in various officials in the European Union very clearly knew that we were having negotiations with both integrated structures. In the initial phase, both of them welcomed our position. But there came a time when our colleagues in the EU thought that these two, or membership in these two integration structures is irreconcilable. So we were forced to make a decision to join, to accede to the Eurasian Economic Union. because 1,000 strings attach Armenia's economy to the economies of the Eurasian Economic Union member states. We have many centuries of history. We have historical friendships, and the vast majority, up to 80% of Armenia's citizens, support the notion of closer cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union. But I must say, to the credit of EU officials, that much changed in the way of thinking over time. By the Riga summit of the Eastern Partnership, intensive talks, and as you see, we arrived at the right juncture. And on November 24, we signed an agreement with the EU as well. I believe that this reconciliation requires something very simple. One needs to be candid with one's partners and not to conceal the negotiation process and the undertakings. So if in one integration process you have commitments that do not contradict your commitments under another document, then why not reconcile? I believe that we have similar experience in the CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization, being a member of which we cooperate with NATO. This history dates back years, and I believe that in the future there will be close cooperation between the Eurasian Economic Union and the EU. The future is all about that cooperation. The problems that currently exist, and may also emerge tomorrow, are no good for development. These problems are absorbing enormous resources that could be diverted to bettering life for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now the next question from Mr. Seydov, Azerbaijan, European Conservative.
That you were a leader of the war against Azerbaijan. Why you didn't mention about the Khojaly massacre, where kids, older people, women, approximately 800 have been killed by Armenians? Why you didn't mention about the ethnic cleansing, 100% in Nagorno-Karabakh and 7 surrounding regions? And now you try to mislead the international community. How can you organize your policy if you are not ready to implement neither this organization nor other organizations' resolutions? United Nations, Council of Europe, European Union and all international organizations said about the occupation of Azerbaijani territories, and you are not ready to accept no one from this organization. This is Armenian way of integration?
Thank you.
No, I would like to first ask you to calm down and be cooler and not to misfigure my words. I did not announce here that I have been a war leader. I did not have that honor. I was a participant of the just struggle of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. Why did I not mention the incidents in Khojaly that you call a genocide? For the very simple reason that immediately after those painful events, Ayaz Mutalibov, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, in great detail, in a very much informed way, stated facts that clearly showed who actually organized and carried out those massacres. You know, I very much regret. Genocide is not a good thing. Carrying out genocide is not, or surviving a genocide is not an honor. It's a suffering. And I think there's a trend in Azerbaijan to have whatever the Armenians have had. This, you see, is impermissible. Why do you need to call something a genocide which never occurred? And it was never carried out by the Armenians in particular. As to the international organizations and our commitments assumed and the fulfillment of these commitments, you are just wrong. There is no international organization that would have adopted a decision that would have been rejected by Armenia. You tried to recall the UN Security Council resolutions. My advice to you would be, when you go into a topic, go into it really and study it. The world knows that the UN Security Council has never discussed the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh. In 1993, the UN Security Council adopted 4 resolutions on stopping the hostilities in the Nagorno-Karabakh area. After each resolution, Azerbaijan came out and said it will not stop the fighting. It attempted new offensives, new attacks, but as usual, it suffered losses. In these 4 resolutions, the only commitment of Armenia was to use its reputation, its authority, and its influence to get the hostilities to stop. To the credit of the then government of Armenia, we honored these commitments, this one commitment. The number one who was responsible for it, Azerbaijan, who was responsible for stopping the hostilities, failed to stop the fighting. And as you know, in 1994, impossible. You want to return into Azerbaijan, Karabakh. Unfortunately, xenophobia in Azerbaijan has gotten to the point, it has advanced so far that you're explicitly saying that you need Karabakh, but without the Armenians. That is impossible. It is never going to happen. The essence of the struggle of people of Nagorno-Karabakh is very simple. It is a struggle for liberty. It is a struggle for self-determination. And that struggle cannot have anything but a positive outcome. I am sure.
We must now conclude the questions to Mr. Sargsyan. On behalf of the Assembly, Mr. President, I thank you most warmly for your address and for the answers given to the questions. Now, in information, the ballot for electing the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights is now suspended until this afternoon sitting. Voting will reopen at 3:30 and close at 5 p.m. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting this afternoon at 3:30 with the agenda which was approved on Monday morning. The sitting is adjourned.